was freaking weird.
Oh, okay. I'll let you be then. It's gonna be alright.
Okay.
Oh, jeez. Silicon Valley and the tech still doesn't work. Sorry, I know you're really looking forward to doing this. But if you guys do want to start getting implementing done with your EMF readers, you could turn them on by holding the button down and just start pointing them at the person that's with you. You want to get green because green usually is good, no ghosts here. Any other colors like yellow or red, I would just start asking some serious questions. And you can turn off the beeping by pressing the button one more time too. Great, so once we get them all signed in, we can get started. How do you give your tool? Get my speaker going. It feels a little spooky tonight. I don't know about y'all. It feels a little creepy. See? Right as I said that, it started to change red. They hear us. That's why we got to turn the beeps off on machines because ghosts don't like it. Yeah, so Langston, if you start getting yellow or red, just be careful. There might be ghosts around you, okay? You bring your Ghostbusters gear? Oh, I'd be a little worried about that. Everybody else who's signing got a pin? Yeah? Alright, well, let's go ahead and get started so that the ghosts don't go to sleep early tonight. So we're going to go ahead and walk this way and I'll give you some introductions. Woo-hoo. Week after Halloween, we'll still see something. Stopping right here. It's a ghost hotspot. No kidding. Here we are. Good evening, ghost hunters. Oh, there we go. There we go. My favorite thing to say is like, let's wake the dead. But if I neglected to introduce myself, my name is Jade, and you've made it to the Haunt SF. We were started just under 10 years ago by two best friends right out of college. We're giving free history tours to local kids in hostels. And after that, they became interested in ghosts, the paranormal, and San Francisco's rather large list of serial killers and true crime. And from that, the Haunt was born. So tonight, we will be using professional ghost hunting tools to gather evidence of the paranormal. And we're one of the few companies in the country to do this every week for the public. So I'll be here next week as well, in case you want to see me again. Uh, kidding, and no pressure, no pressure. If we don't see them tonight, you can come back next week. But anyways, tonight I want to share a little bit more about myself as a ghost hunter before I move on. So I've lived all over California. I've lived in East LA, Sacramento, and San Francisco now 10 years. And in all three places, I've had paranormal experiences. And so they started when I was a baby in LA. And I used to point next to my mom's face and I'd make different expressions. Sometimes I'd be happy, sometimes I'd be upset. Or I would, point away and then point back. But they were always right next to her. And as I grew older, I started to tell her what I was seeing. And I'd say, oh, hey, Mom, can you turn off that light by your face? She would look. There was no light by her face, so she got a little freaked out. And as I started to get older, I started to do research into this as to what it could be. I watched all the ghost shows, and these were potentially spirits trapped into a ball of energy or an orb. And so I might have been seeing this while we were living in that house. Once we moved, I didn't see them anymore. I had other experiences in Sacramento, and now here. Anytime I've had some kind of paranormal experience as an adult, it just feels like anxiety, and it just feels like stage fright a little bit. So I haven't seen things anymore. I did also get contacts, so could be that. Could have just been seeing things as a kid. So you'll notice tonight I love to keep my mind's eye open. I like to see different things in the world around me, but I also like to have a healthy level of skepticism. Otherwise, I'd be convinced every single one of you is a ghost. So I gotta check myself. So you'll see that come out tonight. But I will take you through the sinister stories of San Francisco's dark past. We'll learn about some murders, mysterious deaths, and some ghostly apparitions. We're a city that's been baptized by fire. We've been plagued by rats. We've built upon and dug up our own corpses. We've had our homes splinter before us with the quaking, shaking earth. And we even have this ominous creature that lives in the sky. It's very dense, it's thick, and it rolls in at about 7 or 8 in the morning. It's our fog. It has a name, it's Carl. It doesn't sound very scary, but when you're driving at night and you can't see 10 feet in front of you, the fear will set in. But we're a pretty spooky city, and things will get creepy tonight. Past few nights, ever since Halloween pretty much, we've been having a lot of activity. We've been having things communicate with us. We've had people get chills, feel like something's tapping them, so we can have that experience tonight. Something we will not experience is a jump scare. So I'm not going to come up behind you guys and grab you and say boo. So if that does happen, please let me know, because those are the other guys, and I got to take care of that. So don't expect that tonight. Otherwise, does this sound like the tour you signed up for? Alright, good, we can move on. So tonight I will be taking you through the old Gold Rush era Jackson Square and through Chinatown. By day, these neighborhoods have a lot of traffic, a lot of tourism, and by night they're just a little more dead. So for the next 90 minutes, we'll be walking through them, and there will be no bathroom breaks along the way. But if you do really need to go, let me know, and I can direct you to some restaurants and places. Another option is just to pee your pants and mention in the review just how scary this tour was. It's an idea. Tonight we will be completely outdoors, so you can either leave your masks on or take them off, whichever you're more comfortable with. It does help as the wind picks up, so keep that in mind. But the ghosts won't be able to catch COVID from you, so that's a good thing too. And we will be ending the tour not at this location, but 3.5 blocks up in Chinatown. It's a downhill walk coming back, so if that makes you feel better, know that. And I'll also leave you by some restaurants and some bars and some places that you can just pick up a card from. So there'll be a lot of fun things to do where we'll be ending. And, oh, like I mentioned, we'll be completely outdoors tonight. We will not be entering any buildings. We will not be going into the underground. The tunnels are very unsafe, so we will not be doing that tonight. But we will be able to experience just as much above ground. Dun, dun, dun. So before I move on, I would like to know more about who all is with me, including any spirits that might be in the area. Just kidding. I can't tell. But anyways, we're going to use our thumbs tonight as a gauge. So if you are a 24/7 ghost hunter and you actively saw this opportunity, you're going to put a thumbs up. If you're a little more skeptical and you're like, I'm not sure about these ghosts, but I'm willing to look for them, go ahead and put a thumb in the middle. And if you're a complete skeptic, and I'm going to have to use all my evidence and tools tonight, go ahead and put a thumbs down. I won't be offended. I get a couple of them. But go ahead and show me what I'm working with tonight. Oh, okay. We're all over. I don't think I have any down though, unless I missed one. All right, that feels good. Ooh, so maybe we'll see something. And then, do you want me to get rid of the phone for you now? Yeah, I figured you were like, please get rid of this for me. That's the scariest part of the tour. So, before we move on, I do want to talk about this tool that we will be using tonight. This helps me a bit with those that are a little more skeptical. But this is an EMF reader, and that stands for electromagnetic frequency reader. That was a little more obvious, huh? These are used by electricians to detect wiring behind walls and underground, so they save a lot of money for them. But they also save a lot of time for ghost hunters, because humans, all living and all non-living things, emit low levels of electromagnetic radiation, and these can be detected with these machines. And then when we pass, these are more easily detectable. So ghost hunters found that the EMF reader will go off when there is a spirit or entity present. But other things also set these off. So some of you were playing with them earlier, and you may have noticed that when you put it by the iPad, it might have turned red, or when you pointed at someone's phone, it would turn red. In the spirit world, we call these false culprits because they set off our EMF readers, and they're not what we're looking for. So tonight, these will also go off with a PG&E grade. So if you look down, it says high voltage. It might be setting off your EMF reader. These will also get set off by bus lines, my speaker if you get too close to me. So just different things will set these off. So if you get really excited and think there's a ghost nearby, just check your surroundings before. I've had to check myself a lot, and it's a little disappointing, but at least we know what we're gathering is true evidence when we do get it. But if you haven't already started yours, you're going to go ahead and turn it on by holding that button underneath the logo until it turns on. After that, please make sure to silence it by clicking that button one more time. You will see an X come on the screen on the top left corner. If you don't have that, please do so. The ghosts will get scared. Just kidding, it just gets a little annoying when they all start to go off. After that, we're going to calibrate them, so you're going to click on the button 5 times fast. And all the lights should go off on top. And everyone should be, unless you're buying an appliance, everyone should be at 0 right now. And you'll notice there are 2 sets of numbers on the screen. Tonight, we were going to pay attention to the bottom set of numbers where it says magnetic field. And what we're looking for spirits and entities are fluctuations. So we want the numbers to go up really high and then come back down, and go up really high and come back down. When you see that they're a little more consistent, that usually indicates a false culprit. So if you see that it's staying like 5 to 10 to 5 to 10, it's probably just a parking meter or maybe your phone. So we're looking for really dramatic fluctuations in this, and very consistent ones. So that's what we're going to be looking for tonight. Also, please check that everybody in your party is actually alive. So go ahead and point it to them. Make sure you get green. We do charge a prorated price for spirits. So, I'm seeing some yellows. Start asking some tough questions like, do you remember when you died? Do you know what day it is? Roll those out. I noticed none of you checked me too, so I'm really hoping that you just trust that I'm actually here. So I'm flattered. I really am. But the type of entities that these EMF readers can detect, there are 3 of them, and they've been identified by Lloyd Auerbach and Annette Martin, some local paranormal experts. The first type of entity is a residual impression, and these you might be familiar with. These kind of manifest as a hologram, and they're trapped in a loop, so they just do the same thing over and over again. They may not realize that time has passed. They may not realize that they're dead. It's a little sad. But they can also manifest as a cold spot. So when you walk by somewhere and you get a sudden chill, there might be a spirit present. And they can also manifest as a strong emotion. So if you walk by something and become enraged or elated, or you just have this emotion that you can't shake off, there might be something manipulating you. So that's a residual impression. The second type of entity that we can detect tonight is a poltergeist. And these tend to interact a little more. They might tap your shoulder. They might get a little aggressive and yell or pinch you. These are the ones that throw things across rooms. So we may detect that tonight. And the third type of entity is an after-death active consciousness. This type of spirit's a little more aware when they interact with humans, like maybe a little harder to tell if they're actually here or if they're not. This sounds a bit like the Sixth Sense, maybe. That's a really good example of an after-death active consciousness. But another way to tell is by how they're dressed. So if you notice that someone you're talking to is in more aged attire from a different era, you might, you know what guys, actually that's not a really good indicator. We're in San Francisco, and we all try to dress a little different on some days, so that's I don't think that's going to work tonight. So just use your EMF readers as indicators. If you're talking to someone and they turn red, maybe just ask some more questions. But, well, sorry, I thought that would be a good clue. I guess not. But anyways, before we move on, I want to recite a poem to honor the lives that have been lost here, and to also invite any spirits that may want to join us on the tour. So I'm going to ask that you either close your eyes or look down, whichever you're more comfortable with. To the earth and those that lie beneath, to the paths we'll walk and those who have tread before us, to the homes destroyed and to those they once housed, to the city and its echoes, may we bring only blessings and come in peace. All right. Are we ready to descend into the San Francisco underworld? Yeah? All right, it's over this way. Let's go.
There's some people that need pins that sign in. Yeah. Alright, we're going this way. Don't be scared, I'm real. You did? Very subtle, I didn't even notice.
I will be stopping right here. Folks, we've actually made it to our scariest part of the tour. Behind me, across the street on the corner, is the Church of Scientology. Just kidding, they're not handing out pamphlets right now. They're really nice too. But right next to them is Columbus Avenue, and up in North Beach, this intersects with Powell Street, which is a home to our famed cable cars. Hope you guys get to check them out. They're really cool. But back in the 1850s, when the streets were being carved around the city to make way for the big population, Gold Rush brought a lot of people. They ran into a problem with where they wanted to put Powell Street. There was a graveyard there. But city officials says, not to worry, we'll just simply dig up the bodies and move them over to Yerba Buena Cemetery. This didn't really go as planned. I have some pictures of them exhuming bodies at that time. Here we go. The Daily Alta California reported, bodies were pitched into heaps onto the side of the road, then shoveled into carts and driven off to mass graves. Here's a picture of the emptied crypts. The coffins that were most decayed were burned, and the rest were sold as firewood. Yeah, so not very respectful of the dead, right? Later reports showed that some bodies didn't even make it over there and are still below our very feet. But I think that these are the lucky ones, and you'll see why. Because in 1871, San Francisco decided to build a new city hall. Any guesses what they wanted to put it on top of? Yeah, the other cemetery, Yerba Buena. So, once again, those residents are evicted and moved to a new location. But oddly enough, only a fraction of the 5,000 bodies were found. And the ones that they did find were decapitated and headless within their coffins. And they found that some of the bodies that they found were just haphazard scatterings of loose bones. Yeah, not much care taken this time. What happened to the bodies? What happened to the heads? There are a couple of theories that are really strong based on practices at the time. One of them is that they were used for satanic rituals. Another is that they were used as cadavers for medical students. Another really interesting one is that the heads were cut off to avoid vampirism. The idea is that you would become a vampire after you died, but if they chopped off your head, you wouldn't. That was a strong one. But there's a stronger theory based on what a reporter said. He was walking on his way to work, and he saw a man poking at the freshly exhumed bodies, and he was putting something into a jar. And he was scraping adipocere, which is a gray wax substance that begins to coat the body as fatty tissue decays. So he stopped and chatted with them, and he quoted, "Struck by the singularity of his employment, I interrogated him as to its object, to which he coolly replied, he was gathering it to make soap. Yeah, I know, right? So you guys seen a Fight Club where they use human fat to make soap? Yeah, we were a really clean city at the time. But San Francisco grew tired of moving bodies in the early 1900s, and they banned all new burials within the city. And over the next 50 years, they undertook the project of moving bodies and grave sites outside of city limits. Again, this didn't go quite as planned. It wasn't fully successful, and we're still finding bodies that date back to the 1800s over by City Hall. And they had a worse practice on top of that, where they would dump tombstones into the bay and into nearby beaches. And in 2012, we even had one washed up on Ocean Beach. Yeah. And they didn't do this with all of the tombstones. Some of them were recycled and used in city parks as steps and rain gutters. So if you guys walk around and you see someone's name etched into the ground, you might wonder, oh, did they donate that or pay for that? No, they were just a very conveniently placed tombstone at the wrong time. So, San Francisco actually did move some bodies successfully, and they sent them over to Colma, which is a true U.S. necropolis, a city of the dead. For every 1,000 dead residents, there is one still living. And their motto is, it's great to be alive in Colma. I have a friend who lives out there. He keeps trying to convince me to move there. And she's like, come on, you always complain about the noise? Your neighbors are going to be really quiet. Yeah, no thank you. So City Hall is built on top of a graveyard, and the hauntings started the moment that they opened their doors. And the hauntings were so bad that in October of 1924, the Department of Public Works started to commission official seances. And they continue to do these every year in October. And they allow one group of ghost hunters to come in. But their reasoning for starting this was really interesting. Every day after 12 p.m., they would hear 5 rapid knocks in different parts of City Hall. And they would go to different places, try to figure out what it was, try to see who was there, and they never could figure it out. My theory is that City Hall is haunted because they're on top of a graveyard. I solved a mystery, but I still hope I get to go on this tour one day. So we're going to continue on, and we're going to go over to that alley, and we're going to wait for the light to change. I just ask that you tread lightly and be careful with where you step, because you might be on someone's grave. So we're going to go this way.
Oh, never mind. The cars come out of nowhere and even on one-way street, so. Oh, no, because I said there's lots of doors there. Yeah, this is one of the older parts of the city. We might get some activity out here. I saw a lot of people were looking down at their readers over there. I don't know if we had a lot of activity going on. No problem. Why is mine? Okay, I'm gonna stop over here. We'll go back to the alley in a moment.
Are we kind of following along like where the Barbary Coast is?
Yeah, actually, one of the owners of the tour company was really into it, inspired by it. So did some more research after that. So come on in, you can fill in on this side as well. We had some people check, and I was green. I'm not a ghost, so don't be afraid. Alright, so we all made it. So we're going to go into the alley in just a moment, but we're going to start here. That alley right there represents the old shoreline of San Francisco. So everything from here all the way to our Embarcadero is landfill. And this is comprised of mud, sand, and buried ships. So ships would come in and out of San Francisco, moving supplies and, keeping the trade strong. We were a really great port city. But the ships were not meant to stay here. They were supposed to go on. But many young men would have the idea, I could stay on this ship, get treated badly, make hardly any money, or I could strike it rich and become a millionaire in San Francisco. So naturally, they would abandon ship, and sometimes even the captains would leave. And because of this, San Francisco just started to leave the buried ships where they were, and sometimes they would just build on top of them, as we can see here. This is just a couple blocks from here, or was, just a little north. But some of the ships were just too much, and so they started to send them over to the south, and they would burn them. And people claimed that the burning masts would look like candlesticks. So have you guys heard of Candlestick Park? Yeah, it's from burning ships. A total of 47 buried ships have been found in San Francisco, and I think it's a shame that it wasn't 49. Even like the 49ers, like even harder. And here you can see what one of those ships looks like when it's freshly exhumed. I heard this was a huge problem when they were building BART, because they kept running into ships and they had to keep calling in historians and everybody. I think it's really cool though. Lucky us. But now I'm going to talk a little bit more about the alley. So it's called Hoteling Alley, and it was named after A.P. Hoteling, who owned horse stables there starting in the 1860s. And when we pass through, you'll see that there are some hitching posts with some horses on it, and those date back to that time. And that's where, if you were doing business with them, you'd hitch your post or your horse onto the post. You can't hitch a post to a post, or maybe you can. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And they would go do business with him. So there's also a bar right next to it called the High Horse. So there's just like a whole little theme going on. But when I see them, I actually think of the earthquake that we had on April 18th, 1906. I don't mean we as in I was a spirit then. I would just like to clarify that. But that earthquake was a 7.8 magnitude, and it was absolutely devastating. But what was worse was the aftermath. So after the earthquake happened, some gas lines ruptured throughout the city, and people's houses would fill up with gas, and they would light their stoves for breakfast, because this was about 5 or 6 in the morning, and kabloom, their whole house would blow up. This led to 80% of the downtown burning down, and the fires raging on for 3 days. It was devastating, and people said it wasn't just dangerous inside of buildings, but it was also dangerous outside, because as we can see some of the buildings now, most of San Francisco is constructed of brick. And this would just crumble onto people as they were passing by, and onto horses that were tied to the hitching posts. So I have a picture from that time of the horses under the collapsed buildings. So please don't look if you don't like this type of, tilted it up through. So nobody escaped the earthquake. Humans weren't safe, animals weren't safe. And things just got worse after that. So after the earthquake, after the fires, there was a stampede. So just to the west of here is Cow Hollow, and at the time of the earthquake, those were the dairy farms of San Francisco. The animals there were spooked, and unlike the horses here, they were able to escape. So they started to charge throughout the city, going after anything they could. And they got over to Hoteling Alley. I'm sure it was a different name at that time. And people were walking around just a little dazed, just trying to piece things back together. The buildings had collapsed everywhere, and it looked very different than it does now. So people are walking around, and they hear a little rumbling sound, and they just dismiss it as another earthquake and move on. But the rumbling grows louder and louder, and when they look down the alley, they realize that they were bulls, and specifically 50 bulls that were stampeding and charging down the alley, goring everything in their path. And people were terrified, and they started to panic, but they finally had some good luck, I will say. The stampede was so strong that one of the buildings that was about to collapsed right on top of them, and an officer, Henry Walsh, took out the rest. And we do have some pictures from that time. We caught that moment of good luck. So please avert your eyes if you do not like to see dead animals. Here are the bulls. Yeah, so San Francisco went through a lot. There was the earthquake, the fires, the stampede. So a year later, it was still very difficult to rebuild. I'll show you a picture from just a couple months to a year after. San Francisco was just, bless you, but just splinters at the time, just bones of buildings. And you guys remember Carl, the fog that I mentioned? Yeah, so on days that the fog would roll in, it would look like the city was on fire again. So people were very traumatized. And there's a young man named Frederick Stonesworth who worked in this alley, and on that day, a year later from the earthquake, April 18th, 1907, he had the sensation that the city was going to burn again. But he just went into work because he couldn't do anything about it. So he comes into the alley, and he's unloading a shipment from South America, and he can't shake this feeling. But he continues working, and he starts to hear the low, distinct rumbling of hooves. Now, he had survived the stampede a year earlier, so he knew this sound. But when he looked around, he didn't see anything, so he continued to work. But the rumbling just kept getting louder and louder, to the point where he had to look again, and this time he saw a stampede of pure white bulls coming down the alley, just like the year before. But Frederick had no time to react. He had no way to escape, so he just accepted his fate. He stared down the alley, just waited for the bulls, and just decided to close his eyes. The bulls approached, the pounding grew louder. He took a breath in, and right as the pounding grew so loud he knew they were right next to him, he felt a strong breeze pass through him, almost knock him to the ground. But Frederick was able to open his eyes, and he looked around. Can you guys guess what he saw? Yeah, absolutely nothing. There was no bulls, there was no dust moving in the air, no stone turned. It was just Frederick and the shipment. But people to this day still hear the sounds of animal hooves and galloping. They could sometimes feel the rumbling, but the most prominent feeling people have had in this alley is the strong breeze pass through them. So we're going to go through the alley, and we're going to keep an eye on our readers as we go through it, and let me know if you feel anything or hear anything as we go along. All right? Don't be scared. Can actually see the hitching posts that I was talking about. These date back to the 1860s. One got hit by cars, as you can see. They survived the earthquake, but not cars. Alright, we're all here? Yes. So, I want you guys to check out that building over there. It's a simple brick structure, and it dates back to the 1850s. And I say simple because you're now going to look at this one right here. This one dates back just 10 years later to the 1860s, and it's much more ornate and has a little more pizzazz, if you will. This is when that gold rush money settled in and people could really spend more on architecture and design. And this was also AP Holdings Warehouse, from the street is named for, as you can see right there. And the building. Ooh, that's really ominous now that you think about it. But we're going to actually talk more about the 1906 earthquake, not so much the gold rush yet. And when the earthquake happened, I mentioned that there were fires for 3 days, right? I have a map that shows everything that was burned down, that 80% of downtown, and that will be in red. So we're not a big city, so a lot of it burned down. And right now, we're in this little tiny rectangle that was salvaged. But because the fires were so bad, the U.S. Army was called in, and they offered to put in fire breaks throughout the city. And fire breaks are when they use dynamite to blow up entire city blocks. And the reasoning is, if there is no house to burn down, you can't burn it down. So they were getting rid of the fuel for the fire. And San Francisco said, yes, please, when and where can you get started? And the U.S. Army proposed to put their fire breaks right here on Jackson Street. This was a problem. The people said, are you sure that's where AP Holdings Warehouse is? And the Army said, what, the dead horse guy? Why does that matter? Well, what they also didn't mention was this was the biggest whiskey repository in all of the West Coast. So you can't burn that down because the alcohol will burst into flames and there'll be bigger explosions and it will just be very bad. And then there'll be absolutely nothing to drink after all the devastation. I think that was the main driving force there. So it became a showdown between the U.S. Army and the San Francisco alcoholics. Yes, we must put the fire breaks on Jackson Street. No, you cannot. Yes, we must. No, you cannot. And I want you to look at that building again and notice that there are 0 burn marks on it. There are no scorch marks. It is a completely clean building. I think we know who won here. The alcoholics. And they did win. The U.S. Army ended up putting the fire breaks in North Beach. And this was probably because afterwards they realized they didn't use dynamite, they used gunpowder. So the fires were bigger, the explosions were significantly worse, and this caused most of the churches, homes, and businesses in San Francisco to burn down. And people started to connect the dots after this. There were some religious zealots who said that this wasn't a coincidence. This was God's retribution for San Francisco being a hedonistic city of bars, brothels, murder, and gambling. But not everybody felt that way, I will say. There was a poet who countered that, and he's quoted on that plaque over there. And it says, "If, as they say, God spanked the town for being over frisky, why did he burn the churches down and save Hodeling's whiskey?" Beautiful, right? So yeah, not everyone felt that way. They had their own responses. But I think this was a good end for A.P. Hodeling's legacy. He unfortunately died in 1900, and he saw 2 of his 4 sons die before him. But there is now a distillery named after him, and he's also been cited in this very neighborhood. I have a picture for you guys to check out. I guess it's a drawing, because it's not a picture. But he's been rumored to have been seen in those upper 2 levels there. They function as financial firms, and at the time that this was A.P. Hodeling's warehouse, he also used those upper 2 levels for his bookings and finances. Coincidence? We'll never know. But, so there's one story that really stands out to me, and it's Robert's story. And he said he was here late one night, probably like a night like tonight. And everything was closed up, and everyone had gone for the night, so it was just him. And he's sitting at his desk doing some financial projections, and he looks over at his chairs and noticed that there's someone sitting in his leather recliner. But he dismissed it, they disappeared, and he moved on. He later goes to sit in this chair, which if you've learned anything from me up till now, you know I would not do that ever. If someone was sitting in my chair, I would have been gone. But Robert's much braver than I am. So he goes to sit in the chair, but he runs into a problem. When he goes to sit down, it feels like there's somebody already there. So he looks back, sees nothing, and he tries again. This time he gets pushed off the chair as though someone's like, "Hey, I know I'm sitting here." He looks again, sees nothing, but decides to give up 2 times and couldn't sit down. So he goes to sit in his smaller leather recliner, which he usually reserves for clients, I would like to add. And he decides at this point to have a drink, a good decision. He's been seeing things that night. And so he goes to open his decanter, finds that it's already been opened, and there were 2 glasses of whiskey waiting before it. Oh yes, it's scary, right? I'm convinced that this was A.P. Hodeling trying to show who's still in charge and who owns this building. It's still his warehouse in his heart, but I have yet to see him for myself. But something that we can see as we walk by that dates back to the 1860s is A.P. Hodeling's haunted vault. When people go inside, they reported feeling really claustrophobic, but they've also reported feeling intense heat, as though the fires are still raging around them. So we're going to go pass by, and I'll point that vault out as we go to our next location.
Don't get mesmerized by it. You can see it right here. They had a video projecting it the other night, and I was like kind of creeped out. I'm like, oh, who's going in there? Not me. Have you had any reads on your reader? Or?
It goes right now and then, but it's
Pretty
not
tame.
sure what.
Alright. I know, I was having like almost getting 1 out in the alley. And
Yeah,
I
look,
couldn't
now
get
it's
nothing there.
right.
Oh yeah, these will set it off.
Yeah.
I will stay. This is where my skeptic comes out, and
Yeah.
I have to like check myself. I'm gonna turn into this street right here. Just watch your step as we go down. kind of nice when there's not as many cars. Alright, cool. Yeah, these are supposed to be Gear Deli warehouses. I was like, oh, I wish they were here when I was out. Yeah. I'll use some quality control. Alright, I'm gonna stop right here.
So we're going to continue with the Gold Rush Street theme. We are now on Gold Street, and excuse us, this is so named because this will be your first stop when arriving from the gold fields. Miners would come with buckskin bags full of gold dust and nuggets ready to spend. But stores didn't accept that, so they had to go over to the assay office where they would get their gold tested for purity and then stamped into coin. Then you could finally spend all your riches. So they would do this, and because of that, this became one of the most violent and dangerous streets in all of San Francisco. Everybody knew that if you were here, you had money. Everybody knew that if you were here, you were rich, and everybody included thieves. So thieves would wait on the sides of the street, kind of like some of us are. Oops, way to embody the spirits. Hey, you guys are really feeling the tour, huh? So they would wait on the sides of the streets ready to jump out at people, and it was often reported that people would get mugged or killed upon entering or exiting Gold Street. And because of that, it is home to quite a few hauntings. We get a lot of poltergeist activity here, so people feeling like they're getting tapped. We've heard voices here. We had one woman get pinched in the calf here, and there wasn't me, I promise. But there have been reports of that. We haven't had reports of people's wallets moving or money going missing, so it seems like the thieves have died off a bit. There's more of that tonight. But there is still one place that you can lose your gold, and it is over at Vic's. It is a fine dining restaurant with live jazz music, and it is also the home to the original assay office. So it is a historic landmark, and it's, once we pass by, you'll see it has really cool decor. But we're going to go ahead and go this way and just, go ahead and take a peek as we pass by. When we pass the electrical lines, take a look at your EMF reader because we do get a lot of activity towards the end of the alley. And right here too.
Oh, what about right here? So I'm getting
Everyone.
8 to like 3.
So there are some lines right there that will set it off. So, but usually like over here, if you get it, and then that's a little weird. We haven't had as much activity on this part of the alley. Towards the end we do though. But if that does fluctuate a lot, let me know. But I was going to say enjoy it because this is one of the best preserved Gold Rush streets in San Francisco. That's why we might get some fluctuation there. But yeah, try this side and see what you get because this side there's more lines.
And then I'm more inclined to believe it's not a false culprit. Oh, but see, yeah, like that'll set it off. That was low. Are there any fluctuations or are you getting
There
like
was fluctuations, but now it's low. It's staying low now.
Maybe it was something over there then. It's so hard to tell, like you can see like
Yeah,
this
there's too
mess.
many options. Too many things around.
I know, I always joke, I'm like,
His phone is insane. So
okay.
his phone is gonna set everything off if I'm too close to him.
But no, I keep like joking with people, I'm like, we should like work with PG&E to have them just shut everything down for us for the tour one night, just so we can get accurate reads, but we're like, shut up our service, yeah. So these are a little harder.
So you should go drink crazy out.
Oh, no, that's actually not a bad idea. That would be a great time to go. And then it can also help you to find electricity. Because these things type that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so usually around this time is where I get activity, and usually right past it. Let me turn up there. Oh no. I used to get some like right here.
Good. Whoa, I was just up to 20.
You're up to 20.
25.
Can you put it towards the ground and see if you get anything? Okay, wait, let's go.
Mine just went off
Yeah, let's try something right here. All right, let's gather around. AT&T, I don't know if that'll set it off.
Okay, I'm just looking at nothing.
50, 80, 90.
50, 80, 90.
You're getting
Back
50,
down.
90?
Now I'm at
Oh, wow,
4.
Okay, yeah, we
41,
definitely do this.
Or something like
So I
that.
don't see any prominent like electrical things, and that's not setting it off. All right, we're gonna try something here, folks.
And mine will be fine.
So I'm gonna bring out our next tool, and I'm gonna leave this off because it will interfere with it. But I'm gonna use dowsing rods. Have you guys heard of these or seen them before? Seen some yeses, some nos. There's also more space on this side if you guys want to come up. But dowsing rods have been used over 1,000 years, and their primary use is to detect minerals and underground water sources. So in 2017, some reports came out from 10 out of the 12 of the UK's water and sewage districts. They reported that they used dowsing rods to find underground water sources successfully. So we will not be doing that tonight. We're not looking for water. We're ghost hunters. We're going to be looking for spirits. I know you guys are probably like, well, why are we using them? Well, so we're going to be using copper ones, and copper is a non-magnetic material. So that's just to show that I don't have a magnet in my pocket. I just have some more pins in case anybody's doing that one. But I don't have a magnet that will be manipulating them. They are manipulated by the electromagnetic field. So the idea is that we'll ask some open-ended or some yes or no questions, excuse me, and the spirits will answer them. So I'll let them know that if they want to say yes to us, they cross them. And if they want to say no, they'll open them. And we've had some pretty consistent answers on this street and the next one over. Recently, there's one over there that's a little more hesitant. Like we'll get like really high rates on the readers, and then nothing happens. So, one of you will get to do this tonight. You'll be one lucky victim, one lucky volunteer that will get to communicate with the spirits. And when you do so, you're going to hold these by the handles here. And you want to make sure to have 4 fingers in front and your thumb resting in the back. And you want to not hold them too tight because you'll start to shake them. Also, you want to make sure that your thumb isn't sitting on top because this will allow them to just hover together and you will get very boring answers. You also want to make sure you don't obstruct the bottom because again, you will get very boring answers. So when you hold them, you want them to be at about waist height. It's harder to control up here and you get a little tense, and also harder to control down here. And you want them to be mostly parallel to the ground and hovering still. If you find that you're too far forward, they will just cross and you'll get a lot of yeses. If you find that your fists are too far back, you will just get a lot of no's. So you want to make sure you find that little sweet spot, and you'll feel it like when they can just move on their own. You feel a breeze, you can tell. You also want to make sure to face forward and not uphill, because you'll get that. And to also not face downhill, because you'll just get that. So you kind of want to adjust your hips a little bit for it. And wait till they're about there. Alright? Would anybody like to try them? Yeah? Yay! We have time. We could do a second victim. Alright, so go ahead and stand there. And I can just take your spot and ask some questions. So what you want to do is kind of want to rest your thumb on the back there, yeah. And tilt them up just a little. Do you feel how they could just move on their own now? Great. So, while he'll be using the dowsing rods, the rest of you will also have a job. So I'll be asking questions and we will hopefully get some responses. And you'll be paying attention to the bottom set of numbers and see if there are any fluctuations. Oh, can you see okay? Because we can switch. Yeah, I'll make that a little easier. So yeah, pay attention to the readers as we do this, because I won't tell you where the fluctuations happen. I want you guys to come to that conclusion. Alright? So we'll get started. You feeling ready to get started? Okay. So good evening, whoever may be here. We would like to talk with you. So if you can answer us by moving the rods, we would really like that. When you say yes to us, you're going to push the rods together and cross them. And when you say no, you're going to push them apart to open them. Do you understand how to use these rods? Looks like over there we're getting a read. Oh yeah. It's moving a little bit. Alright, so it looks like they understand. And then in between each questions, you're just gonna drop your fist down and set them up again. So that way the previous answer doesn't influence it. Do you feel them move at all, or do you feel that difference in how they move? Yeah, you doing alright? Okay. And then adjust. Oh, was that you or that moved on its own? Maybe drop that fist again and reset that one. Ooh, did you guys get any reads when that happened? No? Okay, that might have just been angles in. See, that's why we do this, because we got to rule out some stuff. So, all right. You got a 28? Okay, let's get some good time to ask.
20.
This is like
It's jumping.
Oh my gosh.
24.
Oh.
39.
So that moved on its own too? Okay, readjust that fist again. Jeez, something's really messing with it. Alright, reset it. Thank you for your patience with this one. So, whoever's with us, have you been here a long time? Oh, so that looks like a yes. And you're getting fluctuations over here?
Yeah.
Alright, so it looks like they've been here a long time. Go ahead and drop the rods again and let's see how long. And you guys getting reads over there as well? Alright. Whoever's here, have you been here since the 1860s? Oh, whoa.
That was immediate.
That was an immediate yes, huh? I wonder why they're only using one though. Mine's still really low.
You just have one arm, maybe.
You guys want to ask that?
Yeah, I'm sore subject.
Alright.
Did he leave?
Let's try to readjust those if you can. Whoever's here is really like active. I've been getting a lot of hesitance recently. Whoever. Oh, hello. Maybe just tilt your fist back a little bit.
Are they up the tree?
Something's trying to convince you tonight, huh? So find that sweet spot where they're not moving. Maybe they just want to move. Jeez. We're trying to talk with you. Just let us ask questions. Whoever's here, did you die nearby? Oh. I don't know the name of that street, like what it was at the time. But if it's an after death, after active consciousness, it might know the name. So let's see. Are we on? Are we right off of Gold Street and Montgomery? Oh, okay. That's a yes. That's true. We are. Let me ask one more, and then we'll move on because this one is like really hot tonight. Should I say it's a cold spot? Is tonight Sunday night? No.
Must be that daylight savings.
Well, that makes daylight savings. Well, that also makes me wonder if it's a residual impression because it's just trapped in a loop and doesn't realize time has passed. But we'll let it go for now. So thank you to whoever was talking to us and good night. And we'll give a round of applause to our living spirits. Yay! How did that feel? How did it feel when they were moving?
Like very active. I've used these before.
Ah, that's why it's so easy for you to reset them.
But this, I've never had them move that much.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, so something was kind of like maybe excited to talk with us.
They wanted to check in.
Yeah. Anything else that you could describe to us? All right. Maybe someone else. Did anyone else feel anything when this happened, or get any really high reads?
Mine's going up and down right now.
What are you getting right now?
A moment ago I had like 25.
Oh wow! And we've been getting like really low 4s and 3s here.
I had to go up to 60.
You had 60?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, that's really high.
Yes.
So whatever it is had a strong presence
Yeah.
here too.
Yeah.
Ooh. Mine was like consistent. And yours right now, what are you getting? But it keeps like jumping a lot. Oh my gosh.
But why
And now
would a
that I'm here, it
1?
goes back down. All right, whoa, whoever was here really liked us.
Right,
Please don't
yeah.
join the tour because You don't have any tickets, but thank you for talking with us. All right, so we're gonna move on to our next location. Yeah, thank you. We won't disturb you anymore. So my understanding with that is that it's just like, I think it's whoever's closer to wherever it may be. Because like, just think like as you are walking away for some electrical lines, like you will get different reads as you go along, right? So if there's something right here and there's two people and this one's closer, this person might get a different read than this one. Just because of proximity. But the science behind it is still like so, but from yeah, exactly. It just sounds like we don't know, but like based on my understanding, like it's just like one of you just might be closer than the other. But we're gonna turn here. I had this couple in the store one time tell me like in their culture it's believed that like some people are open to spirits, some will never be able to see them, and some like can communicate to them. And like I wonder if that, if that belief is true, like I wonder if that plays into it all, We also get some interesting reads around here.
Yeah, I'm getting. I just got up to 25 of 48.
Yeah. So I'll say there's like I had a medium here a couple weeks ago now who like couldn't communicate with something here, but we all get like 70s and 60s on the EMF reader. And she said that it was like a little boy who was hesitant to talk because there were so many people. But this is the second time I've had a little boy mentioned on this block. And I thought that was really interesting. I was like, funny you should say that because at the store we're going to, I've had someone say they see a little boy next to me, which freaked me out.
Don't bring anything home.
Yeah. So I burned my sage at home that night. I was like, oh, nope, all the corners, getting blessed. But she said he was really nice and just confused. So I thought that was interesting. We're gonna stop right here now. But that's why I asked if you guys had reads on that little corner, because that's hot activity there.
Yeah.
Also, this is another phenomenon here. Look at how many parking spaces there are.
Wow.
This is a San Francisco first. Where, maybe you may not have seen any ghosts, but you saw some parking spaces in San Francisco. Ghosts and parking in San Francisco. But more importantly, behind me is the Hippodrome. And this building, like many in the area in the 1860s, was a gambling hall, a dance hall. And on the lower level, it was a brothel. Yay. But up until last year, it wasn't that. It was an art supply store. And in the back area, there is a doorway that leads down a set of stairs that takes you to a tunnel and an entryway that date back to the 1860s. And I have a picture. Here we go. So I would also like to add that the tunnel goes back to the 1860s, but the decor does not. Goes back to Adam's family, Uncle Fester. But I did have some ghost hunters on the tour one time, like we debated, like maybe Uncle Fester was alive in the 1860s. It's entirely possible. Something to think about. But we've confirmed with some locals in the area that these were that this was a part of the Chinatown tunnels. And as we learned a couple stops ago, the shoreline wasn't very far away, so these tunnels would go right out to the shoreline. And they were built without any permits filed with the city. There were no plans anywhere. They were built entirely illegally, so they were used for illegal stuff. People would smuggle things in and out of the city in the dead of night, and they would smuggle in some opium from India, alcohol during the Prohibition, but they would also smuggle out some dead bodies. During the height of the Black Plague, San Francisco city officials didn't want people to know how bad the devastation was, so they kept the numbers low by sneaking the bodies out. Yeah, they didn't do that for this pandemic, do not worry. But they also smuggled out live bodies in a practice called Shanghaiing. Have you guys heard of that? Hopefully not by experience, for those that said yes. But ships would go from port to port moving supplies, as we've been learning, and many young sailors would abandon ship. And so the captain would be left with their job and their ship and a shipment and nobody to move the ship. So they would start to hire crimps. And crimps were tall, well-dressed men, not even someone of my height. They were like lady killers of the city. And they would go around recruiting young men to work on ships. And they would say something like, hey, you
free drink. So they would go along with it. And then the crimp would go to the bar and say to the bartender, "Hey, bartender, 2 drinks over here. One for me and one for my friend." Because then the bartender would bring over 2 drinks, probably holding his whiskey. The crimp would enjoy his, and the young man would fall to the ground unconscious because his had opium in it. So yeah, bartenders started to see this as a problem. You know, all these young men lying on the ground unconscious. We must do something about it. And they did. Some of them started to build trap doors that would drop the men down into the tunnel below, and then the crimp would come and carry them down to the shoreline. And what they would get from it is they would get the sailors' first 2 months' salary. The sailor would get something too. They would get a job, a free trip around the world. I know this sounds bad, don't worry, I'm totally kidding. But they would also, their first stop would be in Shanghai, which is where the term Shanghai comes from. And many people ask us, well, why didn't anybody do anything about this? Where were the authorities? Where were the police? Why didn't anyone stop this? This practice was fully legal until the early 1900s. San Francisco saw it as a way to continue trade, to keep the labor force strong, but they also saw it as a way to get rid of young men who didn't want to work. They didn't like them going around just getting free drinks and looking for gold, so they saw it as a way to get rid of them. Yeah, they've cut that program in San Francisco. We don't do that anymore. They realize the wrongs of it. So, we're going to move back to the more current era, to when this was still art supply store. We talked with the old manager, Justine, and she had some pretty interesting things to share with us. She said that her female employees always had odd experiences in the store when it was when they were opening up or closing. But one time it happened while a customer was there. There was a woman that I watched in an interview that said that a bottle of paint flew across the shelf right after she finished talking with somebody. And that same woman had other experiences when the store was opening. She said she would hear footsteps going down the aisleways, and she would go to check and see if it was another coworker. It wasn't. It was just her. But the different woman would say that she would hear voices and see shadows in the back area where the doorway was that would lead to the tunnel, which is pretty interesting. Justine was never bothered by any of these spirits. She said they were just kind of annoying, but they weren't negative. They were just kind of there. But her employees kept complaining. So she brought in the Alameda Paranormal Society, and they led an investigation here, and they brought in a team of all women. And they set up 2 cameras to record overnight, and they put them on tripods on the same table. And the next day when they played back the film, they found one of the cameras shaking violently, while the others stood completely still. And they didn't capture anything on the image on the video that moved it. It just moved on its own. Quite odd. On that same night, they captured the apparition of a Victorian-era woman. She was wearing a tight bodice and a poofy skirt and a little hat tipped to the side. And I've had a couple people on different tours tell me that they've seen her as well. I had one woman say that as we were walking up, she looked up at one of the windows, and she was the type of medium that would see images in her head, and so she described her. And I had another woman say the same. And then there's one medium that she said that she saw her up in the windows, and that she looked over at our group that was there that night, and she was just kind of like, oh, okay, and moved on. Because like, I think this is interesting, because I always joke like, oh, we don't want to disturb the spirits, they don't want us here. And she mentioned like, no, actually she doesn't mind you, and she's just curious as to what we're doing. But I think that what's really interesting, and this is all my theory, but one time they were doing a renovation at the art supply store, and they found a woman's bones in the corner. And remember, this was a brothel, and this was part of the Barbary Coast. It was the red light district. There was a bit of seedy activity. And the medium and I are both convinced that the woman that appears in the window with the Victorian-era clothes, she's the same woman that was found. Again, this is like my theory and not, I need to do some more research, but I did want to share that. So if any of you do see that, let me know, and you just won't get spooked tonight. So we're going to continue on and move on to our next location. Let me know if you guys see or feel anything here.
Not that I know. There's one over there, but over on this side, I'm not quite sure of. But the tunnel that I showed you guys a picture of is about right underneath here. So it's just below ground. Kind of creepy, huh? Yeah, over here there are more power lines that I'm aware of. I feel like this is just not going off at all.
Yeah, mine's been green for a long, long time.
Green for a long time.
So
Green is good in my eyes. especially the week after Halloween. I'm like, ugh. I
Yeah.
had some spooky encounters that weekend.
Yeah, back on the street, everyone around me was red, mine was green.
Yours was
Just
green?
zero, perfectly zero. Just fine.
Are you okay with that?
Oh, yeah.
Or were you looking for red?
No. I held mine to someone's, like hers was like flashing red, mine was green.
And you've recalibrated yours too?
Yeah. It occasionally goes
Well, there it
fine.
goes with the PG&E grade though.
Yeah.
I know. Sometimes I wonder, I'm like, do they just go to certain people? I'm so curious. I'm sure as we develop more technology, we'll learn more. We'll cross in a moment. So that really cool building there is Francis Ford Coppola. I don't know if you got any career posts about on there, but it's his. And it's all copper. It's really cool. So we could all get a set of dowsing rods from it. Yeah, I will say there are some bus signs here that will set off the readers. Yeah. They're very strong. The force is strong with this one. Alright, let's go ahead and cross. We can see our starting location from here too. Pyramid. Looks spookier from this one. Ooh, angry spirit.
Jump scare.
They told you there would be none, but they were fine. So we get some really loud vehicles, and there's a time where I have to wait to talk again. I'm like, man,
Yeah.
you don't want me to share this story. I'll be stopping right here. Looks like all our ghost hunters made it. So yeah, we probably all got a lot of high reads up on the street there with the bus line. I always get really mad when I see them. I'm like, no, you're ruining my evidence. But anyways, we'll just make sure to leave space for people as they come by. Yes, but we are learning that San Francisco has been pretty obsessed with ghosts since about the 1860s, and that belief is still going strong. Behind me is one of the oldest streets in San Francisco, Kearny Street, and because it's one of the oldest, it's home to an inordinate amount of hauntings. One of the most well-known was the Mr. Jorgensen. In December 1871, a disembodied face appeared in a second-story window on the corner. The other night I was out here and I had somebody say, Jade, I see it right now. But when I looked, we all realized that it was a living person. It was not a disembodied face. So we were all really disappointed. Like, our readers are red too, so we're like, oh, maybe, just maybe, but no. But it used to be the home of the old widow, Mrs. Jorgensen, and the face was believed to be that of her dearly departed husband. He had a sorrowful expression with a droopy mustache, wavy hair, and a face that stared out the window day and night. And day and night, people would wait outside to catch a glimpse of it, a bit like we are. And so many people would start to come that they would block the traffic. And at one point, the city of San Francisco deemed the window a public nuisance and had it removed and taken to a judge's office. The judge observed the window, didn't understand why there was a face on it, and had it sent to the San Francisco Chronicle. They brought in a scientist, and the scientist said, it's just a chemical reaction. But people didn't like this answer. It wasn't good enough for them. So they went on believing that it was Mr. Jorgensen. And Mrs. Jorgensen no longer wanted the window at this point. She got over her husband's death, and she was like, you guys are dragging it on. And it was acquired by Woodward's Gardens. They were an amusement park that also had a large collection of freakish and unexplained oddities. I don't know how the two go together, but they did. But unfortunately for us, the window was destroyed in the 1906 earthquake. But fortunately for Mr. Jorgensen, his spirit was finally released. Or if you believe what the scientist said, the chemical reaction was finally released. So whichever.
But there's another famous spirit from this street, and it's the Kearney Street Ghost, and this one's a poltergeist. So this one would tip off your hat on a day that there was no wind. So I do see a couple of hats. Just hold on to them in case he's out here tonight. It's not very windy. Yeah, readjust if you need to. But he would mess with everybody. But there's one type of entity, or there was one type of person that had a more experience with this entity, and this was Albert Crumb. He's somebody that lived nearby, and he said that the Kearney Street Ghost lived in his home. And his reasoning was that he couldn't keep a maid for more than 24 hours. And it wasn't his personality. I looked into it. But he would hire the young woman, and he would show her around and give her a tour of the house. And then he would show her her room at the end of the night. She would put her things away, she would get all tucked into bed, and then she would turn down the lantern. When this would happen, a tall, dark, shadowy figure would emerge from the corner and make its way towards the bed. It would start to hurl objects at the maid, and she would start screaming, and Albert Crumb would come running down the stairs. He would open the door, he would shine the lantern, just to reveal the maid screaming in bed and nothing else. The creature disappeared at this point. But this would happen over and over again. And Albert Crumb finally got to a woman named Bridget, and her story was a little different, but otherwise the same. He brought her to the house, he gave her a tour, she did some light cleaning, and then he showed her her room for the night, and then she put her things away, all tucked into bed, all snuggly-wuggly, and then she also turned on the lantern. And just like all the other women, a tall, dark, shadowy figure would emerge from the corner. But this is where Bridget was a little different. She didn't scream when the creature started to hurl objects at her. She was caught in sleep paralysis, so she was completely frozen still, just could stare before her and wait. And that's what she did. So the creature approached the bed and finally made it to the side because she didn't scream. And when it got there, it let out this deep, unearthly groan and withdrew from its belly a small damp object, and it placed it on Bridget's pillow. It repeated this 8 more times, groaning louder and louder with each withdrawal. And when it got to the 9th one, it let out its deepest groan and muttered, "Oh God, must it be?" Then it turned into the corner and disappeared. At this point, Bridget was able to scream, and she did. And she screamed her head off, and Albert came running down the stairs, already used to this. He opened the door, he shined the lantern, and this time revealed what was next to Bridget. She had 9 fluffy, dead, white kittens, all with a bloody red handprint on their fluffy white fur. Those are all the details I have for this story. So we're going to move on into Chinatown on that note. This way.
I don't think Albert was a cat person, based on what I've learned. Maybe that's why I couldn't keep him in, you know? They picked that up on him. Nah, it was totally a ghost. It was totally a ghost that did it. That was kind of cool. I mean, I wouldn't want to pay the fee to the company after messing up the bike, but you know, I'd still like to look cool. Watch out for the new shoreline of San Francisco. It's been coming up more and more, so it's becoming a thing now, unfortunately. We'll stop right here for a moment.
The spirits are close. Actually, there are some power lines right there, so as you walk away from it, I do ask if you notice if there are fluctuations.
The kitties are okay.
Anyway, we are now in Chinatown, and this will be our last leg of the tour. This is one of my favorite neighborhoods, and my thing to say is there's always something to eat, always something to drink, and always something to see, including the spirits. But when Chinatown was getting started in the 1860s, things were a little bit difficult back in China. There were some issues like droughts, famines, floods. There were uprisings like the Taiping Rebellion, and there were 2 opium wars that had been perpetrated by the British. So things were really challenging. And many young men would look out here and see the old gold mountains of San Francisco, and they'd become enamored. And so they'd come out here, but they actually didn't find any mountains of gold when they arrived. They just found mountains of racism. So if you came to the U.S. and you came to San Francisco and you were of Asian descent, you were only allowed to buy property and live within Chinatown. And San Francisco forced less resources and less jobs and forced this part of town to become a bit of a ghetto. And people started to form groups against this and fight back and create more opportunities. And they formed tongs. And some of these still exist to this day. And I like to see tongs as like a YMCA. So people would come here and they get them connected with jobs, housing, friends, get them some English classes, and give them as many opportunities as they could when they arrived here. And some of these did really well and were very successful. But some of them didn't do as well and started to turn towards more illicit activities like opening up gambling halls, opium dens, and also brothels. I'd like to remind you that the tunnels are right below our very feet. The shoreline wasn't very far away, so human trafficking became a very popular practice. This was further worsened in 1875 with the Page Act. All women of Asian descent were banned from entering the country because the U.S. government had a hard time telling the difference between sex workers and non-sex workers. So they just banned all women. Yeah, not a great practice. In 1882, they made things worse with the Chinese Exclusion Act, and they banned all men of Asian descent from entering the country. So this created a bit of a bachelor society here in Chinatown, and human trafficking ran rampant. But over time, people pushed back, laws were changed. In 1943, the Page Act was repealed, and in 1965, the Immigration and Nationality Act was put into place, making a lot of change for immigration and also a lot of change here in Chinatown. There were some other businesses that popped up in the early 1900s, and we're going to go over to the location of one of those because they're closed tonight, so we actually can go to it. So follow me, and we're going to go to the Great Star Theater. I'm really excited about this location. It's a little bit haunted. Here we are at the Great Star. Their lights are all off, so it'll be cool to see what readings we get here. Yeah, see, like, this is what I've been getting all night.
Yeah.
The ghosts don't want to see me, guys. Look at this, all green. But anyways, the Great Star Theater opened in 1925, and at the time it was called the Great China Theater. And it was a Chinese opera house, and I have a picture. Do you guys know Bruce Lee? So he used to come here all the time because his father was a Cantonese opera singer, and he would perform here at the Great Star. And I've actually had some of the workers come out and tell us that, so like I know it's legit. They're really proud of it. Excuse me real quick. But there have been some hauntings reported over the years because there was rumored to be an opium den underneath the stage run by some gangs. Even though it mostly functioned as a theater, this is all still disputed. But we were stopped on a tour one time by a young man named Jason, and he had some friends that worked here in the 80s, so these hauntings go back a while. And he said that they would have weird experiences in the women's bathroom underneath the stage and also in the seating area. And there was also a body reported in here in 2015. There was a lot of odd activity that occurred over the years. And in 2016, the Alameda Paranormal Society was brought in, the same ones who did an investigation at the Hippodrome. And they did an episode of The Haunted Bay, which I highly recommend. It's on YouTube. It's really cool. I'm not in it or anything, so I'm not like plugging it in. It's just really cool. And they brought in the medium June Ahern. Here, I'll start on this side since I usually start on my left. And they made sure to not give her any information before coming in. They wanted her to have a clean slate, no bias. They just wanted her to come into the theater and see what she read. And when she came in, she initially picked up on a performance going on. She said she could hear people singing. Everybody sounded really happy. It was just like a performance going on. And she also encountered this positive spirit in the seating area. And she said she thinks it was an usher because he kept asking her how she was and how she was feeling, and he really liked working there, but he didn't die there. He specified that, which I thought was really cool. She also picked up on some negative energy. The spirit, or that person that had passed here, she picked up on them, and she's a little disturbed by this. And she also picked up on the woman in the bathroom underneath the stage. So while she was down there, she kept seeing a woman brushing her hair, and she was very tall and had long black hair. And she kept saying that she just had a heavy feeling when she was around her. So she thinks something bad might have happened, but she couldn't quite pick up what it was. And there was also this stairway that led up to the back alley, and she could see people running up and down it, but they also didn't have a very positive energy. So she was a little curious as to that. But on that same evening, when the film crew was setting up for June, they had their own experiences before she even got there. So their first issue that they had was as they were setting up their cameras and their EVPs and their spirit boxes, and I have one of those tools for all of us in a little bit. While they were setting up, their batteries would run out all of a sudden. Like they'd go down to like 3 bars, 2 bars, and then things would die all of a sudden. Interesting, they would die. But they also had an issue with one of their microphones. So they were setting up a camera, they screwed the microphone onto the top, and as they were filming, that microphone flew off the camera, and they specified that it didn't fall off, it didn't break off, it flew off. And so they thought that was really odd, like something maybe didn't want to be listened to or didn't want to be heard. But there were some pretty weird experiences. That was back in 2016. Things have changed since then. The theater was bought out by a new couple. Our owners have met them, and we got to go inside of the theater and got some high reads. But they still report feeling some discomfort in some parts of the theater. But otherwise, they say that things are going really well. The energy has changed here. Everything is all legitimate. There are no opium dens underneath the stage. Sorry if you were looking for that. But I wish them the best of luck. I really believe that the energy here can change like the rest of Chinatown, and I think it will. So we're going to move on to our next location. Let me know if you had any high reads here or if you had any weird feelings while we stood here. But we're going to wrap up pretty soon, so follow me. You guys feel anything? Yeah, high readings? Like what?
I got up to a 50.
I got up to 76.
You got 30?
I've had like people do things in the windows and they show you something hot must have happened here. So we're gonna go down this house. Watch your step as we.
I'll check my car. Okay, they're going with us. Oh, we're going up.
Yeah. I think I just got one that's like not that great because I feel like I don't know, maybe we got the same ones, but I've been reading like all night. Maybe the spirits have retired me. They're like, nah, we'll leave her alone.
We're done with you. Time to get some new people.
Right. I'm gonna come up on this side.
They've already convinced you.
We know what she believes in us. I'll go with that. And bundle lanterns aren't on because that's usually a nice little picture spot. I'm gonna stop right up here. Bring out another tool for us. Nothing there. Alright, so gotta make sure we got all our Ghostbusters here. Are we doing Ghostbusters? Oh yeah, I wish I could get pushed around for these tours too. You guys are gonna get like double the steps. Alright, so I pulled out our final tool for tonight, and I'm gonna keep this off because the interference will hurt your ears. It's not a ghost voice. But this is an S box or spirit box. Have you guys heard of these or seen one before? Some have, some haven't. Okay. Well, I will explain nonetheless. So an S box cycles through AM/FM radio bands really fast. And the idea is we can ask open-ended questions, unlike with the dowsing rods where we got to use a yes or no question. But we ask open-ended questions, and the spirits can latch onto a soundbite or create their own sound to give us a response. And we've had some pretty interesting ones on this one. I've talked with, I believe, I was about to say that, I believe allegedly. I talked with a couple on here. One time I was asking like, oh, what are your names? And I got different languages too. So initially, the man aggressively told me to be quiet, and I'm not going to say those words in front of a kid. And the woman said, I'm sorry in Spanish, and then when I kept asking questions, she said wife in Spanish, and she also said two. Because I'd asked like, oh, is there a couple here? She said wife too. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And we've also had a Samantha come through, which was really cool. And we've had somebody come through, a Richard, who was on the street with us, because I asked if they were in the tunnels or on the street. They said they were on the street. So I thought that was really cool. So, knowing all that, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to turn it on. I will turn down the volume when I ask questions so you can hear me, and then I'll turn it back up. So if you see me manipulating it at all, it is the volume, so I want to be transparent. Like a ghost. I want to be transparent about that. It was there. That's not a ghost, that's the S-box, just so we know. It sounds like this. So we'll just have to listen and see what we hear. So, good evening. We would like to talk tonight. If there's somebody here that would like to talk, can you please give us your name? Alright, did anybody with better ears pick up any names in there? No? Alright, let's keep asking. If there's somebody with us, are you down in the tunnels or are you on the streets with us? I heard like first time, but that doesn't really make sense for we asked. Did anyone else hear anything? No. You heard street? Street? Alright, so hey, somebody's here with us, wherever you are. Alright, so whoever is here on the street, what's your name? So I heard like something that it sounded like the way they said it was a name, but I couldn't understand it. Did you guys pick up anything? Am I just getting too excited? Alright. Let's try one more. I want to see if we have an after-death active consciousness, if that is someone who's more aware. What day is it today, or what night is it tonight? Did anyone over there get anything? The only thing like close I got, bless you, no one spirit's getting in. The only thing close like I got was Incredible 7, and tonight's a 7, so I could be fishing, but it could also have been a response. So this one's hit or miss. I usually don't get as many readings associated with this area. So we're above some tunnels, so I've been wanting to try it. Some nights it's a little hot, or cold's hot, I should say. But we're gonna go ahead and go to our final destination for the night. Not in night. And there's gonna be a pretty interesting history there. So keep an eye on your readers as we go along, and let me know if you get any spikes as we get there. We're gonna go this way. I might need you for this part, Ghostbuster. Are you okay?
I'm okay.
Yeah. You should probably be asking me. You walk a lot more than I do.
Oh.
I'm gonna turn here. You guys are hanging around the area after. There's some really nice spots for your pictures with lanterns here. I see a lot of people stop in the middle of the street for them. But we could start crossing, and we'll just cross in groups because these intersections are quick. Let's see if you get some good pictures here. And then you guys can cross there and meet here. I'll be right up here. Oh, I have poppets in all shapes and sizes. But I'll be stopping here. And you guys could then cross onto this side. I know, now you're getting some readings, huh? Right at the end. So some of you guys are getting red over there, some aren't. And do you have any more? Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Smart, smart. Oh, I see them. Alright, we'll wait because it's a pretty good story. Are you guys getting some reeds around here? Yeah? I don't see anything on the ground either that would. There's something over there, and I know back over there is a like, you getting some fluctuations?
It says 79 and what's it?
Oh yeah, you're just jumping up. Who's here? Alright, we can get started. So, I want you guys to direct your attention to that building up there. That was the Golden Dragon and the home to the most gruesome massacre in 1977. There were two rival alpha gangs at the time, the Joe Boys and the Watching, and they were always at odds with each other. But one day things just got worse. The story starts at a cemetery nearby, probably Colma, and the Joe Boys arrived and they found that their grave sites had been desecrated by the Watching. So they sought revenge after that. And they were walking around this area on Labor Day weekend of 1977, and when they passed by the Golden Dragon at about 2:30 in the morning, they noticed that 4 prominent members were inside enjoying a meal. So they called up the rest of the Joe Boys and said, now is the time to strike. So they brought in their assault rifles, they kicked down the doors and sprayed bullets across the entire floor that evening. And 5 people were killed, 11 were critically injured, and 0 were members of the Watching. Well, the moment that the doors were kicked down, their trained reflexes kicked in, and they were able to lift up some tables and crawl out the back through the kitchen. And the owners also had some trained reflexes. After all of this, they cleaned up the entire restaurant, cleaned up the blood, and they were serving breakfast by 10 a.m. the next day. It was a tough time, and people just still needed to keep the economy going. But this actually ended up impacting Chinatown in a negative way because only tourists had been killed or injured in this incident. The tourism dropped here. People were afraid to come, and they ended up putting a $100,000 bounty on all of the Joe Boys' heads. They were swiftly arrested, and 3 of them are still living out their life sentence, and 1 of them has since passed in jail. And SFPD put together the Chinatown Gang Task Force. They got rid of all underground criminal activity, and San Francisco's Chinatown has been voted one of the safest neighborhoods after dark in America. You can see it's really well lit. Things have really changed, and a lot of that activity has kind of disappeared. But the paranormal activity has not disappeared from the Golden Dragon. You guys like that transition? So there have been some spooky reportings there. One of our owners of the company went in, and he had an odd experience. He said he had trouble just getting into the building. So he would try to open the door, but it just felt like, it wasn't locked or anything, but it just felt really heavy. He felt like he was frozen into place a lot of times. The air felt really heavy in there. And he kept seeing shadows darting around in the back area of the restaurant. So I will say it is a little hard to recommend it now because of the paranormal experiences. If you're into that, then I highly recommend it. Otherwise, there are some other restaurants in the area that are really good. They're closed right now, but that noodle and dim sum spot right there is awesome. I was there the other night. They take card and cash. Spicy King on Waverly is really good. It's on that little alley there, blocked down, and they're usually open till 10, so you might be able to catch them tonight. But there are also a couple bars in the area, like Lipo Lounge. They were once recommended by Anthony Bourdain for their Mai Tai, and I was there the other night, and it was really fun and really nice. So I highly recommend many of the places here. So yeah, like I said, the Golden Dragon's a little iffy, depends on what kind of experience you're looking for. But if you're looking for a no-ghost night, those 3 spots, I can guarantee, I took my EMF readers out, they're safe, they're ghost free. But this is our last stop on the tour, and I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. I'm going to play a song for all of you by Enrico Caruso. He's a famed opera tenor. Have you heard of him? Yeah? It's okay if you haven't. It's from 1906, but you guys have? Wait, really? Oh, that's so awesome. Wow. He played the night before the earthquake for a packed house of thousands, and less than 12 hours later, hundreds of which would perish in the earthquake. Enrico made it, but he was absolutely terrified and was on the first ship out of the city. He said, like, I'm never coming to San Francisco ever again. I played for them, and they gave me an earthquake and fire. So he wasn't not very happy with the city, but others are. So I'm going to play a song by him for before we go, because on the spirit world, we believe that music creates a sense of calm and a safe space for the spirits, and they're more likely to emerge. So I'm going to play one of his songs, and it's titled, Once More I Hear the Voice. And maybe we too will hear a voice before we go. So I'm going to turn this off, because I'm going to turn the speaker on. And while the music is playing, I'm going to hand out some pop-pops to everybody. They're like the little fireworks. Many cultures, including the Chinese culture, believe that loud sounds scare away spirits. So if anything attached to us, maybe that one that was communicating on the dowsing rods, we'll make sure that everything detaches from us so we can all go home with only the invited guests. So I'll make sure to hand these out, and we'll go on from there. Unlike the spirits. Is that a bad one? Should I retire that joke? I'll retire that one. And here's a picture of him for you all to see as well. Very handsome for his time. And yeah, just keep an eye on the readers in case we do get any fluctuations during the song. And we'll just throw these all at the end. This one might not work. I'll give you a good one. Ooh. Oh! Well, that was a good one. Ooh. And like, is it that one or? I'll see you too. I'm not giving that green one.
Why was the green one?
It wasn't wrapped as tightly. Obviously, I want to drop it because it doesn't.
Okay, woo, we're safe. So, I'm gonna count back from 3, and on 1, we're gonna all throw them down and make sure that all spirits attach. So, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So, like, every time I do that, I do feel like less stressed afterwards, so I really believe that works. So, thank you all for a wonderful tour. After this, you will receive an email with recommendations and links to our review pages for Google and TripAdvisor. I do ask that all of you leave a review. We are a small business and we're just reopening from the pandemic, so we could really use your support, especially the support of a 5-star review. Remember how fun the Pop-Pops were? So, I'm going to go around and collect your EMF readers, so I'm going to ask that you turn it off by holding that button down. And I do also collect tips, and so do the ghosts. We are an equal opportunity employer. So if any of them really stood out to you, let me know, and I'll make sure they are fairly compensated, unlike the sailors. So thank you all for a wonderful night. If you do want to get back to the pyramid, just walk down this street until you see the pyramid on Montgomery. So thank you again, and be safe tonight. I hope the spirits don't follow you. They really like us. All right. Go around for my trick-or-treating.